Welcome to the Economist in Your Ear podcast. So when you see an election night that gives us such a mixed bag of winners, you've got centrist former CIA officers focused on competence, and then self-described Democratic socialists talking about rent freezes, does that really signal a unified national mandate for the winning party? Or actually, do these results maybe point to a deep strategic split hidden just beneath the surface of success?
That really is the central question, isn't it? Because look, on paper, the results from Virginia, New Jersey, New York City, California, it looked like a fantastic night for the Democrats, much better than just good. But you really have to dig deeper than just the scoreboard to get what signal these wins are truly sending about the national picture, especially thinking ahead to 2026.
Okay, let's unpack that right away, because the wins were big. You had some really decisive victories in key statewide races. Take Virginia, Abigail Spanberger, former congresswoman, ex-CIA. She won the governorship. Democrats swept all the statewide offices there. And her platform was very clearly about competence, pragmatism.
Right, and it wasn't just that she won. She really overperformed. Her margin was, more than 6 points better than Kamala Harris's just last year? That's a pretty strong signal about voters wanting governance, maybe dialing back the partisanship a bit.
And you saw something pretty similar in New Jersey, didn't you? Mikey Sherrill, the former Navy helicopter pilot, she won the governorship there. That's a rare third term in a row for a Democrat in Jersey.
Yeah, and again, she outperformed Harris, too, by over 5 points, getting those double-digit margins back that, the party hadn't seen there recently.
So you've got these competence-focused candidates doing well in the suburbs, but then you swing way over, ideologically speaking, to New York City. Zohran Mamdani wins the mayoralty. And this was in a race with apparently the highest turnout in half a century.
That's right. Phenomenal turnout. And he was championing a very different message, a real left populist agenda.
And then there's California. Proposition 50 passed. That's the mid-decade redistricting plan that's expected to tilt future House districts more blue.
So yeah, quite a spread from Spanberger to Mamdani.
So what's the common thread? What allowed these completely different kinds of campaigns to all succeed on the same night? Is there one big factor?
Well, the source material we looked at really points to one major thing: Donald Trump. Specifically, his deep and frankly persistent unpopularity. His approval rating right now is 19 points underwater compared to his disapproval. That's apparently a low point for his second term.
Okay, but why does that matter so much in these off-year elections where he wasn't even on the ballot?
Because off-year electorates are different. They tend to be smaller, a bit older, and definitely more engaged politically. And for these voters, Trump acts as what the piece called a potent negative cue. Even off the ballot, his presence, his unpopularity, it really mobilizes Democratic voters and those sort of left-leaning independents. It gets them out the door.
Okay. So the fuel for these three very different winning coalitions, it was largely this one single anti-Trump sentiment.
That seems to be the glue holding it together, that negative energy.
But, okay, even with that shared motivation, the moment you scratch the surface, things get complicated, right?
Oh.
The headlines might shout, "Big Dem win!" But it sounds like the analysis suggests these were actually three quite different victories, different coalitions winning for different reasons.
That's exactly the core tension. Let's break down those coalitions. First, you've got that competence coalition we saw in Virginia and New Jersey. Spanberger and Sherrill, they won by focusing on, pragmatic stuff, safety, cost of living, and crucially, they made a point of avoiding the big national culture war fights.
Pragmatism over partisanship, as Spanberger put it.
Precisely. That's the sort of successful Biden-style approach, aiming right at those suburban voters.
Okay, so that's Coalition 1, the suburban pragmatists.
Right. It shows a path to winning swing areas. But, and this is important, that success comes with a built-in limitation for the party nationally.
How so?
Well, to win those suburban districts, you basically have to steer clear of some of the more maximalist policies that excite the party's base, like, say, the kind of things Mamdani was proposing in New York. Those ideas could easily spook the very suburban voters you just won over.
Which brings us neatly to Coalition 2. Urban populism in New York City. Mamdani's platform was, it was ambitious. Rent freezes for a huge chunk of the city's housing, free buses, higher taxes on top earners.
Yeah, pure left populism. And it worked, powered by that incredible turnout you mentioned.
But does that win translate nationally? New York City is deep blue. Does Mamdani's success really tell us much about what the median American voter, maybe in a swing state, is looking for?
That's the key question, isn't it? Probably very little. His victory speaks volumes about the electorate in New York City, but you can't just extrapolate that to, say, Arizona or Pennsylvania.
So why can't the Democrats just focus on replicating the Virginia-New Jersey model everywhere else? I mean, that seems to be where the swing voters are, the ones who decide control of Congress. Why worry about harmonizing with the NYC model if it's such an outlier?
Well, it's a fair point, but you can't entirely ignore the urban left. While the suburbs might deliver the marginal seats needed for a majority, a lot of the party's energy, the volunteers, the grassroots activism, often comes from that urban populist base. If the National Party only talks the language of suburban pragmatism, they risk demotivating those high-energy urban voters. And you need that energy, especially given the structural disadvantages Democrats face in places like the Senate map.
Okay, so it's about keeping both groups engaged, even if their policy priorities seem, well, contradictory sometimes.
Exactly. How do you keep both the Competence Coalition and the Populist Coalition fired up and under the same big tent without the platform needed for one group completely turning off the other? That's the strategic tightrope they have to walk.
And that tension isn't just theoretical, right? It plays out immediately in policy terms, especially looking at New York. Mamdani made huge promises.
Yeah.
Government-run grocery stores, free services.
Right. But the reality is those things cost a lot of money. And delivering them depends almost entirely on getting the state government, Governor Kathy Hochul and the state legislature, to agree to some pretty hefty tax increases.
Which Hochul has suggested she's not exactly keen on doing.
Precisely. So you have this built-in potential for conflict, an expectations delivery gap. Mamdani's base expects big changes, but the state budget reality might make those impossible to deliver quickly or at all.
And that kind of internal friction.
Yeah.
That's not helpful heading into the midterms.
Not at all. It fuels narratives of Democratic infighting and unrealistic promises. Republicans will absolutely seize on that.
Okay, let's shift to Coalition 3, the structural win, California's Proposition 50. This is being talked about as a major blow against Republican gerrymandering, potentially netting Democrats, 5 extra House seats? How exactly does that work?
So Prop 50 forces California to redraw its congressional districts now, mid-decade, rather than waiting until after the next census. The idea is to use a process that's less partisan, probably involving independent commissions, to create fairer maps that better reflect the state's overall Democratic lean.
Sounds like a significant structural advantage.
It could be, but that estimate of plus 5 seats needs to be seen as an absolute upper bound. It's the best case scenario, not a guarantee.
Why that caution? It passed, didn't it?
It passed, yes. But redrawing maps mid-decade almost always triggers a wave of lawsuits. Implementing Prop 50, drawing the actual lines, getting them approved by courts. That's going to be a fight. So while it's a political win for momentum, those seats are not yet banked, as you might say. The legal battles will determine the actual gain, and that takes time.
Okay, so we have policy constraints potentially tripping things up in New York and legal constraints potentially limiting the gains in California. And layered on top of all that is this basic issue of turnout, right? Extrapolating from these off-year results.
Exactly. Off-year elections, like the ones we just saw, tend to have electorates that are smaller, older, more engaged, and often more favorable to Democrats when there's an unpopular Republican president, even indirectly.
But 2026 is a midterm.
Right, which means a different electorate. You'll see lower propensity voters turn out. And crucially, the battleground shifts to competitive districts in redder states, places where simply being anti-Trump might not be enough or might even backfire.
So reading too much into these specific wins in largely blue states like Virginia, New Jersey, New York, it could lead to misjudging the actual national environment for 2026.
A definite risk, especially for holding on to the Senate, which involves statewide races in places much less blue than New Jersey or Virginia.
So just running as Trump isn't a sustainable strategy for the midterms.
It helps mobilize your base, clearly. But the effect is probably weaker when Trump isn't directly on the ticket, and especially if Republicans nominate candidates who don't embrace the full Trump persona. You know, more traditional conservatives focused on economics. To hold those swing suburban seats in 2026, Democrats need more than just, "We're not Trump." They need a compelling, forward-looking economic message of their own.
Okay, given all these complexities, what are the concrete things you, our listeners, should be watching over the next few months? What signals will tell us if this Democratic momentum is real or maybe more fragile than it looks?
Well, first, keep a close eye on the governing reality in New York City. Watch those early budget fights. Does Mamdani get his rent policies? Does Albany fund free transit? If there's gridlock or major compromises, that signals trouble.
And nationally, Republicans will amplify any sign of division there.
Absolutely. Second, watch the governing tone coming out of Virginia and New Jersey. Do Spanberger and Sherrill stick to that competence first brand? Do they manage to avoid getting dragged into national culture wars? Or does pressure from the base pull them leftward, potentially risking that suburban support? Their appointments, their first legislative priorities will be key signals.
Makes sense.
Third, track Proposition 50 in California. Specifically, the rollout and the inevitable lawsuits. If draft maps get drawn and actually survive the court challenges through next spring, then you can start treating those potential seat gains as more concrete. Until then, it's potential, not reality.
And I suppose fourth, just keep an eye on Trump's own approval ratings.
Definitely. If his numbers rebound for some reason, maybe the economy improves, maybe some event shifts focus, then the power of that negative cue fades, and the lessons from this off-year election become less relevant for 2026 pretty quickly.
So wrapping this up. It was clearly a good night for Democrats, no question. But it wasn't one single message winning. It looks more like three different wins, driven partly by anti-Trump sentiment, but carrying these internal contradictions.
Right.
And unless the party figures out how to bridge that gap between the suburban pragmatists and the urban populists and finds that positive economic message beyond just Trump backlash, well, 2026 might feel a lot tougher than 2025 did.
Indeed. And that leaves us with a final thought, perhaps. Considering those policy limits in New York and legal hurdles in California, how much of this election night wave was really about genuine, sustainable electoral chemistry building within the Democratic coalition? And how much was maybe just a structural reaction against Trump, potentially masking deeper divisions that could surface down the line? That's the big unknown.
Thanks for listening. Follow us for daily insights into world affairs. And don't forget to like, comment, and share.